everybody. I'm Rachel, and a very warm welcome to your Midlands Analyst Network Huddle. It is, or was, a lovely day here in Stafford, and I hope it's nice where you are too. For any new people who are joining us today, I hope you'll find these huddles useful by sharing skills and learning from each other's knowledge and experience. And there is more info about why we set these huddles up on the Teams channel. And believe it or not, we have been going for almost 2 years. So, wow, what a 2 years it's been. So we're always looking to improve them, and we do very much welcome feedback. So you can do that either via the Teams channel, you can email me directly. And if you have any fabulous ideas, of course, about what we can include in huddles, and I'm always gratefully receiving that type of info. And also, if you'd like to contribute, you are very, very welcome to do that too. Anyway, huge thanks for coming today, and it's always great to see you all. In today's huddle, it's about the new guidance for cross-system intelligence functions and what that means for us analysts in the Midlands. So each ICS in England is required to develop a cross-system intelligence function, and the purpose of that intelligence function is to enable high-quality decisions to be made. David from the strategy unit is going to be talking to us about that guidance and the supporting toolkit in a minute or two, and he's going to be sharing some case studies to help us understand how it affects us and how we can get involved. So I will hand over to David in a minute or two, but before I do that, a bit of housekeeping. If you could keep yourself on mute unless you want to say anything, that would be much appreciated, so we can get the most out of the session today. If you want to say anything, of course, you can just shout out. We're pretty informal here. Finish about 12, and if if you have any questions, you can just shout out. But Menti will be made available to you in a minute or two. So I forgot to highlight my artwork in the background here. This is the up and coming Menti code, which I'm sure everybody is incredibly impressed with. It took me all morning to construct this, and my dear are actually making use of themselves at last. So just a reminder that these sessions are informal, but we do like to keep them as informative as possible as well. So before we kick off, if you would like to go to menti.com with that code there, which is 4693, if you can't read it, 3714. That's 4693 3714. I think Janine's impressed. I've just seen her face. She's never been more impressed in her life. She says I've done her out of a role here. Okay. So I've now shared my screen.
Okay, Rachel, I have no access to the chat today because I joined from my PHE laptop.
Oh, right. Okay, fabulous. So, but are you impressed though? Yeah. My husband walked in. He said, "Do you always do that?" I went, "No." Great. So I think a few people are. I've landed on Menti, which is super. So I'll just move on to the next screen. So if you are there, if you could just, it's great. It's really, really useful actually to know who's here today. So if you could just say what your job is, what your role is, that would be great. And we can just see what we're covering. But I'm covering the organisation separately this time because I want to get a better idea of our coverage in terms of the range of organisations. So we've got analysts. Oh, there's a surprise. Good to see. Public health intelligence, different versions of analysts. Got an intelligence lead there. I wonder if we've got any data scientists in the room today. Got a manager. Analyst is winning. I'd be surprised if it didn't. I'd be thinking I'm in the wrong meeting. Okay, great. So we've got a good range of analysts and other roles as well. As we know, people sometimes have analysis as part of their role. Sometimes they are interested in that role, or they lead people who have that in their roles as well. Okay, great. So that's that kind of it's a great range of people and the jobs that you have. And the next question is, and I've listed quite a lot of organisations here. Where do you work? I know occasionally we have, I think we have one or two people who work in other public sector organisations, for example, police, but I haven't included that as an option here, but maybe I should. Oh, lots of local authority today. Got CCGs represented. Hospitals, other hospitals, so is that mental health, other community hospital? Got a few people from OHID, Trusted Unit, good. Excellent. So we have local authority participants are the winners today. Okay, so I will just put that onto the next slide, which is essentially a landing page for any questions that you might have for David. But I have to say that David will also have his own mentee, so we're keeping you on your toes today. You're going to have to type in another mentee code in a minute or two. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and I am going to hand over to David. Hi, David.
Hello. Can you see the screen?
I can.
Wonderful. All right. So yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm David Callaghan. I'm a managing consultant at the Strategy Unit and Programme Manager for the Midlands Decision Support Network, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I also had a hand in writing the toolkit for ICS intelligence functions that I'm going to be covering with you today. So this presentation will cover both the forthcoming NHSEI guidance on cross-system intelligence functions, not to be confused with the supporting toolkit from the Strategy Unit. They're two separate but complementary documents. Happy to answer any questions at the end. Obviously, you've got the mentee that Rachel's put up. Use the chat box if you like. Do put your hands up if you want to interrupt me. Just be aware that I can't see hands when they go up when I'm presenting. So just shout out or someone give me a virtual nudge if you want to interrupt at any point. There's going to be a couple of mentee polls thrown in, as Rachel has mentioned. I'm afraid there is a different code for them, so we're just testing your attention there. But I'm sure you're very familiar with these by now. So first up, a bit of background as to the provenance of this talk of cross-system intelligence functions and why they're so high on the to-do list right now. Well, back in 2020, the next steps for ICS's document announced this expectation for all ICSs to develop a cross-system intelligence and analytical function. And this was reiterated in the design framework for ICSs published last year. And over the past 6 months or so, this ask has been clarified in the upcoming guidance document from NHSEI. So this guidance from them, which is being shared quite widely but hasn't been published formally yet. It describes what an intelligence function is as a system-wide function that includes analysts from across an ICS working in partnership on quantitative and qualitative insights. And then it describes what it should do, which is to work on system-level analytical questions to inform strategic, clinical and operational decisions. And these should be informed by a person-linked data set and support a PHM approach to care. So the guidance provides a spectrum of these different types of decisions. So an intelligence function will support strategic decision making through things like providing a wider understanding of how services interact with their populations and indeed each other, and also synthesizing evidence from a range of sources to respond to questions and facilitate action. So, think about what is a strategic question. It could be, for example, at which points in a care pathway are inequalities occurring and why. A question that would require more bespoke analytical methods, more likely to be the preserve of the intelligence function. Whereas operational decision making might focus on ways to improve the way a system delivers and manages services, drawing on predominantly internal sources of evidence to the system. And then you've got clinical decision making, which perhaps focuses on common clinical questions, things like how can we identify gaps in care for individuals that can exploit the potential, and this is, you know, a central facet of the guidance for automation and PHM platforms. But ultimately, all of this provides the context. It's hoped for better quality decisions, but through different means. So the spectrum that's presented in the guidance has more of the strategic type stuff done by the intelligence function, and like I say, more of the clinical stuff answered through automated methods, with operational questions straddling the two. But of course, you know, all of this is interrelated. You know, there needs to be recognition of the different tools and skills needed to do these different types of work. And those with more advanced analytical skills can serve the system by spreading learning throughout the analytical workforce. So the guidance sees intelligence functions being networked to raise the capability of the analyst workforce more generally, and providing opportunities for the development for those that are seeking it. So, you know, this network here being a prime example. So in the guidance, in support of all this, are included a set of categories that describe the overall, I suppose, structure of an intelligence function. So there's some features that related to its purpose, to its scope, its governance arrangements, how it uses data, organises and uses data and analysis, how it's resourced and how it develops its workforce, how it uses and engages with multidisciplinary teams, not just quantitative data analysts, and indeed the scale as well of these functions. And these are described in terms of an emerging, a developing, and a maturing function, which I suppose you could guess are presented as a maturity matrix. And these are not essential elements, you know, they're exactly what they say on the tin. They're a set of guidance that can help break down your work plans when looking to establish your own. So I'm just going to show you the emerging requirements that are described in the guidance here. I'm not going to like, it's going to be a bit tedious because I'm just going to read a list of stuff, but it's important as I want to run a poll on these afterwards. So, you know, feel free to listen to me or read the screen. I won't take it personally if you do the latter. So in terms of purpose, the emerging requirements are that the intelligence function responds to pressing cross-system and place-based requirements from senior leaders, providing intelligence on pressures within the system and forecasts of population need. The function supports transformation programs to embed principles of analytics and PHM in new care models. So they're the two emerging requirements around purpose. In terms of scope, the function should receive a remit to inform and investigate system-wide and place-level priorities, and use intelligence to inform the population health priorities of the ICS. And it should also have an agreed analytical project prioritisation process for ensuring that work is high value and can be used to maximum effect by leaders, transformation teams and clinicians. And in relation to governance, there are requirements around having representation in these functions from analytical leaders across the ICS within formal governance, and that there should be an established analytical lead for each ICS. That's of critical importance. There should be clear governance into the ICB and ICP, where both have a steering, oversight and listening role. And there should be a single information governance framework across system partners with an agreed way of sharing information for PHM. A few related to data and analysis. So for emerging requirements, the function should have linked data available on the whole population from primary and secondary care, including mental health and community services. And that data has to be accessible to intelligence function analysts. And that analysis should be segmented where possible by ethnicity and deprivation and other relevant characteristics. When it comes to scale, there should be consideration of the analytical support needed at system, place and neighbourhood levels, and the establishment of links between ICSs within a region or across regional boundaries. There's some key requirements around multidisciplinary teams, so there should be dedicated analytical resource identified in the ICB for addressing strategic challenges, clear collaborative working arrangements with a wide range of ICB teams, so that could include transformation, finance, workforce, quality improvement, etc. And then representation from a wide range of ICS partners, including NHS provider analysts and intelligence professionals from public health and other local authority teams. And then finally, we're getting to the end now, resourcing and development. So the emerging requirements here are that the function should be supported by a dedicated intelligence program team to support the function's governance, that the function should map the system analytical workforce to identify capability gaps in delivering on all the stuff that I've just talked about, and that can build on some of the PHE mapping work that's already been done, or the offer provided by the local knowledge and intelligence service. And then finally, system partners agree a resource plan for the hosting, funding and delivery of the intelligence function, including support from digital teams. So I'll take a rest. We're going to do a quick Menti. So that's what the NHSE guidance suggests an emerging intelligence function should look like. I appreciate I'm rattled through those, but hopefully as you were kind of listening or reading, you've maybe felt supremely confident that your system has these things in hand. Perhaps maybe a sense of dread, you know, that you don't recognise any of this stuff is happening, or possibly most likely somewhere in between those two things. You might also feel that you don't see the relation between these things and what you do. So, like I say, I want to run a quick poll to get your gut reactions to those things I've just read. You know, I don't need you to overthink it, but when you've just heard that stuff, what were the things that jumped into your mind? So, as I said, there is a slightly different code here, so hopefully you can cope with that. Just pop this new code, and you should be presented with this question: thinking about these emerging requirements, what's your gut reaction? You've got loads to do. You've made a decent start. You think you've pretty much got it covered, or you're not sure how it relates to you. And this will be really helpful for just getting a feel for where everyone feels they are in the room against that guidance. So I'll switch over to the Menti. There we go. I'll give you just a minute to do this. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So, you know, quite an even split really between those who see some elements of that in their systems, and then obviously quite a few people who aren't sure how this relates to me. I've been I mean, please use the Menti that Rachel set up afterwards, or the chat box indeed, to, you know, to flesh out that, you know, I'm not sure how it relates to me bit. You know, there might be some points of clarification that we could pick up at the end. So do feel free to pop some thoughts on that. But that's really useful. You know, the majority of people who see it as relevant sitting somewhere in the middle, no one thinking it's completely done, a lot to do for a few of you. So that's really helpful. So thanks for filling that in. I'm going to move on to the next slides though. We've got another Menti to do in a bit. And we can come back round to that at the end. So I suppose the question is, you know, what does the guidance mean for Midlands analysts? So, you know, you may have seen some things in there that might influence your own roles and what you do here as a network. So I thought of a few things that I thought would most impact on yourselves, that I suppose I'll ask you to reflect upon, again, you know, using the Menti that Rachel set up, or the chat box or whatever. And you might have your own to add to this list. So, you know, for example, in the guidance, there's a clear national impetus to overcome barriers to linked data sets. You know, it's explicitly stated as a key tool for an intelligence function. Now, of course, there's been loads of talk about this for a while, but things like overcoming new IG issues are central concerns of making these functions work. You know, there's an argument to be made that some systems have overcome IG issues around linked data sets, others haven't, which means that it is possible, but there are other barriers in the way. So in the toolkit that I'll show in a bit, there are some case study examples of systems that have overcome those IG issues, and they could be particularly useful. There's an emphasis on the link between high quality analytics and high quality decisions, with analysts playing a more influential role in system prioritization and decision making, where you don't think that that might be prevalent at the moment. There's going to be more opportunities for analysts to develop the analytical skills needed to work on more strategic analytical questions, and obviously being part of the Midlands Decision Support Network, those opportunities are already being presented to you. And then networks like this will become essential infrastructure to share the work of ICS intelligence functions. So like I say, you might have thought of others, and and please do share them. Like I say, if you think there are particular things that you've seen that will impact on your role and think are worth a wider discussion. I can't promise I can respond to them all. Some maybe for NHSE as the authors of the document, but your initial reactions to what you think the elements from what you've heard most impact your sales would be really helpful. It's also worth noting, of course, like I mentioned, that through the MDSN, we're already well advanced in some of this stuff. So, for example, we've got the 3 main work streams of the regional programme. This network is one of several, bringing together communities of interest around analysis, including evidence and evaluation. So this is captured in this active knowledge exchange work stream. We're also delivering a regional analytical programme and work with all systems in the region to define and prioritise those projects so they bring benefit to all. So they're a sort of intelligence function vehicle at the regional level. And then we've got this comprehensive training and development programme, not just for analysts, and I'm sure many of you on the call have taken part in that, but also for users of analysis, so to help them be more effective customers. So I suppose the point is, even if you don't feel that advanced in this in your individual systems, or even if you do, there is supporting infrastructure already in place to move on this when ready through the MDSN. So that's a summary of what's in the guidance, which tells us what intelligence functions are all about and what they should look like in the end. Now I'm going to move on to the supporting toolkit. So this is essentially designed to help systems apply that NHSEI guidance. There's been loads of contributors, so the Nuffield Trust have been involved. We've had workshops with public health colleagues, NHS colleagues, academia, local government, etc. So loads of people have been involved in its development. But the toolkit starts from the premise that systems are already thinking about intelligence functions, and some are well advanced in this area. We've seen that there has been some progress through the Menti. So rather than a manual, the toolkit is a range of curated resources that systems can draw upon for their individual purposes. These are there to challenge thinking and also to offer practical reads forward. Nothing here is mandated. It's all designed to support you depending on where each system is at. And it does this in 4 ways. Firstly, it describes how to make the most of different types of analysis in support of your system's priorities. Then it provides a set of tips to get started with your intelligence function and some principles to guide your planning. This is followed by a set of resources that can help you to design and implement your function. And then we provide learning from elsewhere in the form of 10 case studies from other places who have made progress in their own intelligence development. So in describing how to make the most of different types of analysis, we introduce some foundations of high quality analytics in the toolkit. So in this, we're suggesting, and you may disagree or agree, that improving decision quality through better analysis is about both supply and demand. It's not just enough to develop analytical capacity and capability, although of course that's part of it. Systems also need to be designing decision making and learning processes that draw on analysis explicitly. So in other words, system leaders need to be advancing their own analytical confidence, and systems and regions need to organise themselves to deliver high quality analysis. But of course, there isn't just one way of doing this. So as the figure on the left here describes, my left at least, there's multiple drivers to high quality analysis and ultimately high quality decisions. And the toolkit gives a number of examples through the case studies of ways that systems across the country have addressed some of these foundational elements. But at the same time, analysts need to be widening their analytical capabilities to address all the types of questions that are described in this analytical typology, which is described in far more detail in the toolkit, and we've also published it elsewhere. So this includes developing what we consider to be craft skills, things like leadership, problem formulation, communicating results, driving the translation of insights into actions, ultimately creating those conditions for good decisions. So you'll note that these craft skills are covered by many of the courses offered by the MDSN. So they're the founding principles, if you like, that underpin how we've approached the toolkit. You need the right data, good quality data, but you also need analysts who can use it to its full potential, responding to analytical questions, and leaders who have a really good understanding of what that potential is. So in going about this, as mentioned, the toolkit includes a set of tips for getting started with your intelligence function and some principles for realizing the benefits of having great system intelligence. And these have been created on the back of those engagement activities I described. So there's also a more detailed set of 24 principles for developing an intelligence function that are presented as a series of tests that you can apply to see whether yours is operating to its maximum efficiency and efficacy, having tailored the guidance and resources as appropriate to your system. So here's just some of examples of the tips for getting started. I'm going to go through these in a bit more detail in a minute. So for instance, we suggest that you appear don't work sequentially. Start small if needed and then work out to other teams. And that you map the data you have to bring together your system IG resource to work out how best to liberate or link the data assets that you need, and so on and so forth. So 15 tips that you'll see in the toolkit that are practical things that you might do now. And we suggest this is treated as a sort of minimum spec for what you might need to have in place from the outset to get to that point of having achieved emergent status of an intelligence function as described in the guidance. So I want to do another quick poll around these tips, if I may. So I've included a few of the tips related to design, workforce and data in the Menti. So you should be able to use the same code, and I'll scroll on in a second. So I'm just asking you to have a look at them and then rank each in order of 1 to 5, 5 being very difficult to do in your system or very complex to do, 1 being super easy or you've already done it. And then we can get a sense, I suppose, of what the variation in feeling of difficulty is around some of these tips that we're providing. So I'm going to start with the design ones. So you'll see on the page, there you go, should open up now, 3 of the design tips that we've given. We're just asking you to rank them, 1 really easy, 5 really hard, somewhere in between. So I'll just give you a minute. Again, no need to overthink it. We're looking for sort of gut instinctive reactions here. I'll just give you another 30 seconds, but it's looking pretty central. Okay, that's really interesting. Teetering on the more hard than more easy side. So that's really useful to know. And I just want to do the same. We've got 2 around some of the workforce tips that we've provided. So what do you think? What do you think to these? Okay, very similar picture, but slightly further towards the easier side, but very even again. So we're seeing a lot of bets hedged on these. And finally, there's 3 regarding to tips in terms of making best use of data. So what do you think here? Okay, that's super. So, so the most complicated thing we've seen those three is around the data and the and IG, which is really useful to know because obviously we've already talked about that being a fundamental part of these intelligence functions. So something we can certainly feedback and perhaps consider where there might be additional support there. So really useful comments and something we can start to develop a support offer as well with the toolkit. So thanks very much for contributing towards that. That's the last of my mentees, which will be disappointing or brilliant, depending on how you feel about them. So last few things on here then. So if the tips, that I've just been talking about are seen as a kind of minimum spec to get you to the point of being seen as a developing intelligence function, which is the next stage of the NHSE maturity matrix. We've also got more detailed principles for developing your system intelligence over the medium to long term, and these have been aligned according to 5 development areas, and they're design, workforce capability, developing the workforce, engaging multiple disciplines, and then data infrastructure and better use of data. And these, I suppose, can be seen as an extension of the tips, and like I say, are a series of tests to apply as you develop. So that's how they've kind of been phrased. So developing your workforce, for example, over here, we suggest you ask yourself, have you mapped the skills available in the function team against the analytical typology I showed earlier, and have a plan to build the necessary skills and partnerships to allow the team to undertake the whole range of analytical work. So can your team do descriptive, predictive, evaluative analytics, for example? Do they have all of those craft skills are described? And many others. So as I mentioned, we've got 24 in total that can act as a checklist against your progress. And I should say, we're happy to share the toolkit in its current form after the session. It's final, just hasn't quite got to the publication stage yet through the NHS England publication sign-off processes. So we kick off the toolkit with these tasks to get going and principles for assessing your progress. And then these are underpinned by 2 types of supporting information. The first of these is a set of resources linked to different areas of your intelligence function development. So these are reports, articles, tools, etc. that can help inform what you do. And these are organised according to those 5 development areas again. So I'll show you these using the actual toolkit. I'm going to caveat that before I do, though, with the fact that the toolkit is designed for reading, not presenting. So I'm going to go through it here to show you how it's organised. I'm certainly not expecting you to read what's on the pages. They're quite text heavy. So if you bear with me. So this is what the actual toolkit looks like. This is the resources section. So this part here are the resources we've selected to support systems in their data infrastructure and to make best use of data. We've tried to be relatively, I suppose, frugal in the amount of things that we provide. We're trying to be succinct rather than just dump a huge amount of things upon your plate and say and ask you to filter them. So you can see we've included things like this guidance for NHSE from the Health Economics Unit on data linkage. And on the next page here, we've provided, this is an example process for prioritising analytical requests that we've created, drawing on practice from elsewhere. So for each of those 5 development areas, there's pages like this that describes the pertinent resources, where to get them, and then how you might use them. So hopefully we find these, and this is obviously iterative, so we're open to receiving suggestions for others that should be added as we go through and as they're published. So certainly this isn't a fixed document. And then the final thing we've included in the toolkit are some examples from elsewhere, in the form of these case studies. The purpose of these is to provoke discussion rather than provide a template for an intelligence function. So some case studies provide examples of a cross-section of some of those key areas of development, whereas others are focused on a single stage. So they're not designed to be a complete representation of what's happening in the function in that relevant system. So, we don't describe everything that Kent and Medway ICS have ever done around intelligence. We've just highlighted features that may be of most interest to colleagues involved in their design and implementation. So you can see we've got 10 in total. So the Dorset Insight and Intelligence Service, for example, describes how they developed their design, or focuses on how to develop their design, organise their workforce, and made the best use of their data. And we provide some examples for each. Whereas others like what have we got? Kenton Medway, for example, we focus there because they've done a lot of work around linked data sets and data warehousing. We very much focus on that aspect of their work. So if I give you an example of one of them, I'll go to Greater Manchester. There is, for your information, the Midlands Decision Support Network, the Black Country, West Birmingham and Nottingham are all included as case studies in here, but presumably you're more familiar with those. So I'll talk you through a bit of the Greater Manchester one. And again, loads of text on here, not asking you to read it. I'm just helping you figure out how it's organised. So you can see each case study starts with what they've been doing that aligns to what the NHSE guidance is asking for as part of their maturity matrix. So these are the 3 key points in that matrix that we think that Greater Manchester have responded to. Then we provide a summary of what they're doing around intelligence. So in GM, they've got 10 localities, population of around 3 million. And their ICB will comprise of about 2,500 staff from the Health and Social Care Partnership. We've got 10 CCGs and then also GM shared services. And the system have linked huge amounts of data in the process of warehousing it in one place. And they're creating a hub and spoke model where they've got a system intelligence function that does some work once for all. And then also analytical teams in each of its 10 places to work on analysis that requires this local knowledge. So this is a really good example of how, I suppose, maybe a big system with a big population, sees the need for both a kind of strategic system level intelligence function, but then, it's big enough that they can have intelligence teams dotted around the rest of the place as well that can have analysts sitting within them who have that local data knowledge and local population knowledge that they see as essential to delivering good quality analysis at that level. Now, again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically this table talks about how they've designed the thing. So if you had a look in the full toolkit, this is a set of principles that helps them decide what should constitute system activity and what should be done at a more local level. And as with all the case studies, we suggest which are the design principles. So those tests I talked about earlier being delivered through this activity. So everything hopefully gets tied together. And then we also talk about some of the things they've been doing to assess their workforce capability. So we talk specifically about the role of a chief analyst in developing the profile of analysis in the system, and then how they intend to enhance the capability of their workforce as well. They talk, about the time, even though they have what they can refer to as a chief analytical officer, they talk about the time. I think it was something like 2 years it took for that individual to, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, socialise what the importance of analysis across all the key stakeholders in the region. So it's really useful for getting a sense of the time it takes to embed the importance of analysis at a system level where you're starting from a relatively immature position. We also describe in this case study all the activity around developing their workforce. So they've done a lot around workforce capability and some work around workforce mapping. So in each case study, we briefly describe all of this activity, how it responds to the main themes addressed in that NHSE guidance, as well as some of the principles of an intelligence function addressed in the toolkit. So I'm skimming over the case studies somewhat not just in the interest of time, but also because many of the case study sites are presenting their own case studies in a webinar series we're hosting in May, and they're obviously going to do a much better job of talking about what they've done than I have. So if you'd like to come to those, we've shared the links afterwards, but here's the detail. So we've got presentations from Southwest London, who have done some terrific work around their PHM platform. Kenton Medway, who, like I say, have done a lot of work around linked data and data warehousing. Of course, we've got the MDSN, which talks about I suppose the importance of networks for these intelligence functions, and then also the local knowledge and intelligence service, which has a support offer for regional and system intelligence teams. So all of those are included in the toolkit. So the idea is you might read the case studies. There'll be a bit of it that piques your interest. We've then got a webinar that will provide more detail than what's described in the toolkit, but also hopefully provide some honest reflection on what their challenges have been. A bit of a warts and all discussion. We really want to focus in these sessions on not just telling all the good news stories and what's been amazing about what's happened, but some of the barriers they've had to overcome, either structurally, politically, culturally, etc. NHSE also hosted a session with Surrey and Greater Manchester last week, and anyone who signed up to the Analyst X network on NHS Futures will be able to access that. I'd certainly encourage you to do so. Some really interesting presentations on their approach to intelligence functions as well. So I'm going to leave it there. Obviously, I appreciate I've only touched on what's in the guidance and toolkit, but hopefully you've got a sense of what's going to be there, got you thinking about how you might use them. I think the takeaway here is that NHSEI are promoting nationally many of the things we've been talking about for a while here in the Midlands. So we've got a real head start against many of the things that are presented in the guidance and toolkit. But I'm happy to answer any questions or go back into the toolkit if you want to see it in more detail. But I'll leave it there for now, and thank you for your time.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, David. That's a really good overview of the guidance. Am I echoing?
No.
I am from.
You are for me.
Okay. Well, I won't talk much then. Right. So we do have some questions. We've got some points and some questions for you, David. So are you thinking? Can you get your thinking hat on? Right. If I could share my screen, or I could just read some out. How much time have we got? I think I will just read some out for you. Okay. So just a comment. First of all, in response to the first question, somebody wanted to answer that they have made a good start, but they still have a lot to do. Then somebody has brought up the issue of IG, and if it's a main issue for each system, what can be done nationally to facilitate that and reduce endless duplication. If you want to pick up on any of these, just let me know. Otherwise, I will just rattle through. I can't hear you.
So the IG thing, I don't think I've presented this anywhere where the issue of IG hasn't come up. I mean, obviously, that there are case studies in the toolkit that have overcome their IG issues. Surrey, for instance, brought together all of their IG leads, who I suppose adopted a sort of risk sharing arrangement. That might not be the appropriate term, but that's broadly what they've done. Obviously, you're dependent on the right kind of culture and politics in the system to be able to do things like that. So there are arguments to be made that some systems have sorted the IG thing, which means that it's possible, and therefore a national IG framework I think is forthcoming, but that might not solve all of the issues, and some of the issues might be local. So there might be more local answers to those questions.
Okay, so sort of linked to that, someone has pointed out that the data linkage is almost an intractable issue. So clearly IG comes into that, even within organisations. So what is put in place, or what should be put in place to ensure interoperability in the future, and how do we deal with the problems of the past? Because I think it leaves a bitter taste, or it has done. Sort of many organisations. I say this person sort of mentioning, even within an organisation, within teams, for example, where maybe they've tried to do data linkage in the past, and it's not worked or people give up because they know it's so challenging. So it's kind of linked to the first one. So it could be that a national framework, because it's such a deep-rooted and consistent problem everywhere. It just feels like there should be some more sort of top-down solutions to that in particular. We were talking about this when Stephen Wyatt when we were talking about different sources of primary care data, and it came up there. It always comes up, like you said. It always comes up. but we need to sort it. I'll move on to a couple of other points, so we can cover some of the things that other people are saying. So this is sort of a different angle, but so a different point. So this point is around to what extent are senior leaders stroke decision makers currently engaged in the MDSN training offer for them. So it feels like it's a critical to upskill consumers and commissioners of analysis, but ensure this is happening in my patch. So this person is clearly wanting to, well, I guess how do we respond to that? So we can talk about, you can just mention about the how we link in with the each system.
Well, I mean, we've run lots of courses on this thing. You might know better than I, Rachel. I mean, obviously we have our decision quality for leaders stuff. We've done the users of analysis programs. I'm not aware of the exact numbers who have attended those things, but I think they've been well attended and from across the system. So I get the sense, and again, you might know better than I, that there is a recognition that users of data are an integral element to this, not just providers of data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is and we have in place. So I'm thinking about the training and development program that we've had. Obviously, the previous year we're designing and planning the 22-23 program at the moment. So we link in with what we're currently calling the operational leads for the intelligence functions in each of the different areas, and we I guess that program is informed by various sources of information. Not least, I will in fact be sharing the survey that I have oft talked about with the analyst network, and that inviting contributions from that as well. But I take that person's point. They don't feel like they're connected with decisions on influencing that program. So that is definitely something we can look at and change. Gareth.
Yeah, I was just wondering in response to that, whether there's something we can do just in terms of sharing, people, senior leaders, decision makers who've attended some of those sessions, and trying to channel it back out through the ops leads, just so there's a bit more transparency in terms of, local folks knowing who sort of attended those sessions.
Yeah,
so I know
absolutely.
overall they've been pretty well attended, but yeah, maybe we just haven't fed back, on exactly who has attended what.
Yeah, and we're going to do that. So we basically keep a record of everybody who's been on training courses, so that we're in a position to share that with each system. We had some issues with IG in terms of sharing that information back to systems. Good old IG is there always, isn't it? So no, that's a great idea. So basically we can sort of reflect back to systems who is attending these courses, and of course these those links into those systems, these operational leads. They also recommend people to come on courses. They nominate people. So some areas, I have to say, are a lot more interactive than others. And we would love for all areas to have the opportunity to sort of to come on these courses, these training opportunities. Sometimes we restrict it to sort of 1 or 2 per system, and that feels like almost like, what's the point in applying for that? There's hundreds of analysts that I'm competing with, but because we put on quite a lot of courses, quite a lot of dates, it's always worth registering interest. I'm actually doing one of the courses at the moment, which is the research operations course, and it's great. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to be recommending this one. Some really good practical skills being taught by Alex Callaghan. So I'll be talking about that. And actually, just as an aside, I'm learning stuff that people should know about, and are in a much better position to use it as part of their job. So I can't wait to sort of bring that to the huddles in the future. Okay, great. Thanks, Gareth. I'll just move on to a couple of other points, because I've got a couple of other sort of updates on training and development, actually, sort of things that are coming up or are current. Okay, so that's that was an interesting point, and that is definitely something we can do something about. Someone here has said that they're not clear who the analysts part of the intelligence function are. So I think that's going to be a common feeling as well. So as these functions, these intelligence functions emerge, if you are an analyst in a system, how do you know what your role is? How do you know whether you will have a different role, or whether your role will be sort of incorporated somehow? So I think there's going to be sort of questions around that. What are your thoughts on that, David?
Well, there's multiple models that are being used for this. So one it could be that you basically have a very clearly defined separate team that you call your intelligence function that is recruited to against some set skills, and that's led by a chief analyst, and that and that works purely on those strategic analytical questions. It could be a more remote model. We've seen that elsewhere as well, whereby analysts from other teams are seconded in to work on particular projects, that tap into the skills that they have, and that's on a more of a rotation basis. The fundamental, the fundamental part of it is that analysts who are working on this work are given protected time to do so. It's not an addition to their day job. That's what we have running through the toolkit, is that if you want your analysts to be working on these kinds of questions, you need to protect their time to do so, and not be bogged down in other work that's not serving that purpose. So yeah, lots of different models. Those are just two that we've seen and that are described in the case studies. There's more that you'll see in there as well. So there isn't one particular way of doing this. It's up for the system to decide which works best for them.
Okay, thanks for that, David. So there are quite a few comments. So I'm going to have to sort of pick one or two to cover, but I'm going to share the rest of them with you after, David, and we can sort of respond afterwards. So next comment is well, somebody's asking actually, has the national guidance been published anywhere yet? They've received a draft via a workshop, but they haven't seen it published.
No, it's in the same situation as that. So the guidance and the toolkit are just they're in the upper echelons of NHS, and sign off is imminent, but I can't give you an exact date. But as soon as they are published formally, then we'll release them. But like you say, there's no expectation. I don't think that what you've seen will change much. I think broadly that's pretty much what they're both going to look like.
Okay, so thank you. So here's another point. I'll just read it verbatim. So how can we use the emerging intelligence collaborative to embed the professionalisation of analytics workforce and help support structured learning programs to support a defined career pathway?
I don't know what the emerging intelligence collaborative is. Does anyone want to tell me?
If anybody's going to contribute to this conversation, I will give it a second or two. Maybe this is collaborative. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it's saying collaborative as opposed to function. But I think the point here is about the embedding the professionalisation of analytics. So and I'm thinking AFA. I'm thinking the approaches to for the competency frameworks and so on.
Yeah.
Which I think it needs to be intertwined. It's the same thing, but I think this can be sort of this can support that professionalisation of analysts.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is all part of the same conversation as the AFA competency framework for analysts. We wrote a report for NHS England last year on advancing analytics in the NHS and ICSs, which touched upon a lot of the same thing around professionalisation and defining roles more clearly. So yes, this is all cumulatively building towards that exact thing.
Yeah. Okay, and that the intelligence, we are talking about the same thing. So the word collaborative simply means these intelligence functions. So we're talking about the same thing there. Okay, I think I haven't got time for anything more from here, but I will, like I say, I will share those with you afterwards because there's some really good points and some good questions there, and one or two themes that might be useful. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Thank you very much, David. Sorry.
And thank you everyone for participating.
It's great to see you. Don't go yet. So I've got a couple of other slides. I'm just going to share my my Menti again. Am I? It seems to have disappeared. What have I done with it? Ah, right, okay. Could just talk to it. Let me think. In these circumstances, I will try one more time. Yeah, so this is just reiterating what you just said, actually, David. So those 4 workshops or webinars, as you're calling them, I'll be sending an email to the analyst network following this with those links on. Or you can go to the strategy unit website. They're on there. So I just wanted to let people know before we go what's coming up next. So in 2 weeks' time, we've got Andy Orlowski from the Health Economics Unit, and he's going to be talking about PHM impactability. I cannot wait for that. That will be great. I strongly recommend coming to that one. Without a date, but we've got monitoring maternity and building links with other analysts in maternity. So we're talking both in terms of like hospital services and also more prevention. So that'll be covered in that session as well. Then we've got Stephen White, who's going to be talking about the analytical project, which has just been completed, and so he'll be sharing information, his approaches and findings on these strategies to reduce inequities in planned hospital procedures, which is an MTSM project. And finally, on here anyway, we have system dynamics model is going to be presented, which looks at which models the respiratory community response, and that's going to be in end of June. That was end of June. Okay, so we've reached 12 o'clock, and as you know, we like to finish on time. So I would just like to say thanks again, everybody, for coming. Always fantastic to see you. Thank you, David, and I will see y'all in a couple of weeks. Okay, bye.